Okay, thank you, Mark. Really excited to do this webinar, and I just want to thank the docs that have signed up. And for those of you that are logged in on other mediums such as LinkedIn or Facebook, you have to log into the actual Zoom, otherwise you won't get the CE credits. But you want to comment on that, Mark?
Yeah, so folks that are listening in on social media, the registration link is on the description. So if you can please click on that, fill that out so that we can make sure that you receive your CE credits.
Yeah, perfect, thank you. And again, if you, or I shouldn't say again, but if you have any questions, just write it in the chat area there, and Mark will get it, display that for me, and then we can go over any other questions. I can't believe it's been, man, we've been doing these kind of cases, precision partial dentures with attachments for, man, I learned it actually originally from my dad, who was a metal technician way back in the day, like 40 years ago. I hate to say it, but yeah, 40 years ago it was. And it intrigued me. Like I thought, wow, it's one thing to make a crown, but now make a removable prosthesis to it. And we've done many different types of attachments, but this stern ERA attachment is truly one that is easy for the patient and the doctor to work with, and it has all the benefits. And I'm going to go through all the little details of what that basically is. But yeah, first of all, thank you, Mark, from Dentists on Demand, helping us with this this webinar. And thanks for signing up here, and hope you guys are going to pull some pearls. I actually know you will. So first thing I'm going to go on to is, this is an inspirational kind of quote from Thomas Edison. The doctor of the future will give no medication, but will interest his patients in the care of the human frame, diet, and in the cause and prevention of a disease. That whole statement really inspires me, because I always like to get to the root of a problem. And when we find the root of a problem, then we can better, I think, serve patients. So what I want to go over here today is just give you an example of something like this. So you look at this edentulous, partially edentulous patient, and many thoughts go through. If you look at this, there's so many thoughts that go through your mind when you look at this kind of thing. Of course, back in the day, you go 30, 40 years ago, we're thinking crown and bridge, okay? That may be a little aggressive, being this much missing teeth. So the first thing that doctors are now very proficient in doing and is presenting an implant option. But here's what I see happening, and I just know this is what ultimately is happening, is not everyone is going to be accepting of the financial responsibility for this kind of treatment. Yes, it is, no one's going to take away that ultimately it is the best long-term restorative option. This just happens to be a visual of that same case, and we're going to see this finished as we go. But any way you look at it, if you were to provide implants for just that upper arch for this patient, I think most dentists will agree, doesn't matter if you're stateside, in the east or in the west, north or south, this is going to be 24 to 30,000. God only knows, maybe more, okay, for that arch. And so what I want to make sure that everyone knows, that you've got a solid second option that is going to be a long-term option, not a short-term option. And not only that, if you provide a precision partial ERA, which we're going to be talking about today, down the road, you're going to be more than happy. The patient can still do that without losing, thinking that you threw good money at a bad thing, okay? Maybe they're just not ready for it. But one thing I do know is no patients really want big facial labial clasps. And we got some examples of that a little bit later I'm going to show you. And it's nice to have these things. But what I want to show you today, this actual case, you can restore this with a precision partial denture for between $5,000 and $8,000, which I'm going to ask you, I'm not going to make any conclusions, but most patients that can afford a partial denture, they're going to pay for a dentist between $2,000 and $2,500, maybe $3,000 for a partial denture. Most can afford the next level up, and that's having 2 crowns retaining that partial denture. That to me, I think, is a really viable option, and not have the patient, go to a denturist or something else and just get a partial denture. So this is a very unique thing for general dentists. So this is a little slide we just made up because second place isn't that bad. Ultimately, we know that how high the competition level is, but I think the most important thing is you provide a patient with good aesthetics, good function, and it's going to last them for 15 to 20 years if they take care of it, okay? So the next thing we're going to talk about is the thing that probably is the hardest thing for when you do comprehensive treatment. And most of the time when we're doing these kind of cases, depending on how bad the dentition is worn or how long, let's just say we're dealing with a dental cripple, there's generally verticals have to be opened, okay? We're going to talk about basically what we need before we can go to the next step, okay, of planning for if it's an appropriate case for precision partial denture or not. These are the critical pictures. Now, this is my beautiful daughter-in-law. She volunteered to do these pictures for us. So in any event, what I want to make sure that everyone knows, and Mark is going to send, for those of you that haven't got this, any case we do that's in the aesthetic zone, anything, these are the 4 pictures that we need. And I'm going to just quickly go through why that is. The first picture there is a portrait picture. Looks pretty, like what's the big deal about that? But I want you to know what we're assessing when we see that. We're assessing the eye plane, pupillar plane, and the occlusal plane is all nice and parallel. Now, on a patient that has good, nice teeth, fantastic, no problem. But when we're dealing with people that have less, evolved to just horrible dentition and occlusal planes, it's critical we get that picture, okay? The second one, what you'll see is the full E, and that's so we can see how critical we have to be of the gingival third and or the gingival architecture. Very, very important picture because nobody likes dark lines. It's the difference between having a PFM with a normal margin or a porcelain butt margin. Makes a big difference. Some patients, not a big deal. No displaying any gingival area. Then the third one, third picture there, that's retracted. Same full face picture, but with retraction. That helps us get a good picture of what all the architecture of all the teeth are, peeling the lips back, okay? And then this other picture, number 4, is absolutely critical for us also. It basically is showing us that when the patient displays EMMA, you see, what dentists don't realize, and we have to remind them all the time, we don't see the patient. So unless you have meticulous records and give us those details, we don't know how much lip display or tooth display the patient actually has. So it's really, really critical when for the patient, this is when they say EMMA. Normally, a lady will display 2 to 3 mils, a guy 1 to 2 mils before things kind of look, like too much tooth. Okay, so it's just a very, very helpful tool when we're in any restorative, removable or fixed in the aesthetic zone. So next we're going to cover establishing healthy VDOs. Now I'm going to start off by just saying that it's really, really important. Once we get upper and lower study models, I really suggest that send in those study models to us. We're not going to charge to have an assessment of just sending us in a study model. We want you to be proficient with this and be successful with it. And we want to do more of these cases because we think we have a real niche in the marketplace, because there's very few technicians. As we go down the garden path with digital, we're losing, and you'll probably see this, the old school analog techs are kind of disappearing. And we know we have something very special here, and I think it can really help you and your patients. So this is just a couple applications of what we're saying. Again, 2 crowns, a partial denture in any configuration of partial denture, basically $5,000, including lab fees all in, is not an unusual price. And we feel that this is something that is a real service to the community, because like I said, not everyone's going to make the choice for the best, implant restorative. They just can't do it. So, okay, let's do some treatment planning, and let's just think about, options here. Now, I'm going to tell you that most of the time when we're doing openings of vertical, it does demand more restorative, okay? It does demand more, maybe anteriors and a posterior, and really we need to support that occlusion, okay? And we, depending on how high the aesthetic goals are, that's where all of a sudden, again, when you give a comprehensive treatment plan like this, and it's involving crowns and partials as opposed to crowns and implants, there's a big change in the ticket item. And that's what we want to make sure we start getting you thinking about this when you're presenting treatment options. Because I think if you actually do start doing this, you'll be surprised at how many will pick this option. So just quickly here, some key points in partial dentures. I've had lots of dentists say, I don't even do partial dentures. We just do crown and bridge and implants. Well, then I'm going to have to educate a little bit and, rekindle the old notes from school. But with successful partial dentures, you want to have a tripod type support. And that's where you basically have the support of cingulum rest and or on the partial or the precision partial attachment areas. And you can see the little metal housings here. Mark, if I point at this with a mouse, you don't see that, do you? I can't really point at stuff. And
zoom in if you want.
Yeah, no, but what I'll say is just, I'll take this one example, I'll bring it into the thing here. So, can you see this nicely, Mark?
Yeah.
Okay. So, as you can see on this, this kind of situation, we've got a support here, 2 support here, and on the cingulums. And you can see here, this is basically what we're referring to as a tripod type support. This is more than adequate and very stable support. Now this is tissue bearing and tooth bearing. Okay, so yeah, we find that it's just a very, very comfortable and successful option for precision partials. So we'll point to that more a little bit later. So now, the next slide here, I wanted to say is you want to build your house on a rock, not a sandy land. I learned this in Sunday school. But ultimately, what we're looking to do, and it goes for anything, whether financial, physics, dentistry, in this example, what we want to do is always build an upper on a nice level plane that basically complements what we call actually it was Bob Walker who labeled this. He's a chiropractor, but this is one of the courses I went to. They basically explained how important it is to have your pupillar plane parallel with your otic plane, which is parallel with your occlusal plane. That creates the most stability of occlusion, okay? So your teeth are the foundation, okay? The maxillary plane. If you have a cockeyed or a cant or a roller coaster occlusion in your upper plane, everything else is basically hurting as far as being compromised, whether it's the jaw joints, muscles, teeth all of a sudden will hit one spot quicker than the other. And that's a philosophy that we use for smiles, large hybrid cases, denture cases, everything. So it's a very, very important thing. And we just, if you ever want to learn more about it, we go through this extensively in our DENA4 program. So now here's an example of a case. Again, that was the first case that I showed. A demonstration of the patient there of a compromised VDO. This would not be a successful example of what, as far as to do a partial denture with ERA cases or ERA attachments, and I'll explain that and show you a little bit more detail. Because when you got a deep bite like that patient's already worn those teeth, going through those excursions, and if you, in my experience, after all these years of doing this, and I've been reinforced that by all the different schools, for example, Coyce, don't trap an envelope of function. You just don't do that. If you trap that, chances are it's going to break again. So what we like to do is go explain to doctors, whether you do a Coyce deprogrammer or a phase 1 that we teach orthotic progression in DENA4, you need to open that VDO so that we're not going to have the same pressures and breakages in the areas that have already failed. For example, that 1, 2, 1. Okay, so that's what a nice example of what we're talking about, assessing it on a level plane of occlusion. Now, this happens to be mounted on an aculiner. We mount things on Panadents. We mount things on Stratoses. We have all the articulations, Danar, but this happens to be mounted with, because this doc went through our course, DENA4, where we use hamular notch inside the papilla and mount the upper plane, but we verify this mounting with those pictures that I pointed out earlier. Okay, so it's very, very important. So now we're going to assess the level plane of occlusion, make sure we're all on the right track, okay, that whatever we build, it complements the aesthetics and function and everything. This patient happened to go through a phase 1 and in a DENA4 protocol, and we test drove the bite with a series of orthotics, starting with a phonetic bite, and they were able to handle no problem the new vertical before we even laid a burr in the tooth. This is all done with orthotics. So now we're going to talk about some of the applications. Okay, here's one perfect one here, where it's just a unilateral case, and this would be a traditional partial denture. Okay, we did our design on here, and basically what I want to open and try to get you guys to all see, what I see when I see a case like this, I see that one bicuspid, the 2-4 there. I'm sorry for I haven't got the US numbers down, and I know we've got a few US doctors watching here. But let's just say the upper left first bi, that could easily be just a crown with a precision attachment on there, and it would be retained beautifully, and in addition, no labial clasp or on the buccal. And that's a really nice feature for a case like this. So, but I just want to kind of open your eyes to the options and what I see when cases come in, but obviously, you don't want to present this. It's always so hard. When we see this, sometimes it's a two-edged sword. I'll tell the doc, have you thought about a precision attachment in this case? And they says, well, I already did my diagnosis and treatment, or my treatment plan. So it just looks like a money grab if you just say, oh, let's do a crown. So that's why I wanted to really have you guys sit in on this so you could kind of see and talk about this with the patient before. And you know what's really interesting right now with this case here? Even if you did put a crown on that 2.4, you could easily, down the road, still put implants when the time was right for the patient. So sometimes, there's always an application for it, but you may, ultimately, you just got to be able to, I think it's wise to just give the patient all their options. So this one here, I just kind of goofing around like this. Basically, I wrote on here, unilateral considerations. When we design, we want to have essentially what I was saying earlier, 3 points where you're going to have support. Kind of like, Mark, what I showed here. You want to have minimum 3 points. You always have the most solid occlusion when you got 3 points to support, dental support, and then obviously the ridge is also supporting, but you want to have a minimum of 3. So normally we always put a cingulum rest wherever that's applicable, and including the crown itself. So now this one is not, we basically have only real 2 points that this is sitting on, and this is going to be more bearing, tissue bearing in the posterior region, and those crowns are essentially with the attachments only supporting this prosthesis from falling out. Now, you guys know your tooth to root ratio and health way better than I do. And you know which teeth are really compromised and what aren't. And I just always suggest, look, when in doubt, include a double abut something, especially if it involves a cuspid. You can for sure get away with just a cuspid, but if it's obviously a solid one, but when in doubt on a bicuspid, I would double butt it. I just think you're safer long-term, and you get a nice symmetry when you're doing a treatment like this. This slide is just to show us going kind of back to dental school. I'll just breeze by this, but we just ditch this so that the food doesn't get up underneath the denture. Most of the time, however, on a case like this, I will do a palatal strap and suggest it. But as you can see, there is some tori in there, and when there's tori up in the palate, I don't really like to do. It's too uncomfortable, so that's why we didn't actually do a palatal strap on this specific one. Here's just what the frame design looks like. This happens to be a cuspid there with a little ERA hanging off the distal. I just wanted you to see what the frame ultimately looks like. Again, cingulum rest just sitting on the cuspids, and we have not seen these cuspids being pushed out. This is an even pressure, okay? It's not a teeter-totter effect going on. If it is, it has not been made properly at the end of the day. This one here, again, I think it's basically the same slide, just showing where we put the rests and the importance of those. Cingulum rest here. Again, this is a whole nother, we increased the VDO on this one, and we ended up doing ceramic zirconia crowns here, and then just went with PFMs for the cuspids, and just conventional partial back there. So it was really retained by a precision attachment off the 1.4 and the 2.3 precision attachment there. So this guy, we have so many unique various combinations. Tighter bite on this one. That's why we had the metal occlusion. Patient was just concerned they want durability. And docs, I'll tell you, if these don't work, we always get them back, and we just don't get these back. The patients, we look at this and often I look at this and I think, oh, partial denture in the mouth, looks so archaic. But we're all creatures of habit. Once we get used to some certain things, and you just think you adapt. Okay, we all know how people adapt to bad things like bad occlusion. So, you know, if this is just a major connector, that's our biggest issue, and a removable prosthesis, I mean, that's a relatively easy thing for patients to adapt to. And this is an example for supports there. And then we got this, another example of metalwork before PFM, and I want to address that just a little bit. There are some docs that still want precious metal, precious ceramic alloy. It just drives the price way up, and you know, it doesn't become, you know, really I would say practical, cost the price point. So most of the time we're doing PFM with porcelain butt margins on the anteriors, and we get a really nice aesthetic result. So again, at one point I want to point out about level plane of occlusion, why it's so important. On these kind of cases, we have what's called vectors of force. When that mandible is driving into the maxillary plane, if we don't have a leveled engineered occlusion that complements this condyle, you can get into a situation where things break down in certain areas. So if you ever, and one observation I've made, on a maxillary, wherever you have a high side of a curve, okay, on the maxillary plane, that's normally the area that takes the most amount of beating. And that's where, as if you're going to start doing comprehensive treatment plans, we need to look at how to level that maxillary plane out so that the forces are nice and equal coming into the maxillary plane. Again, another point that we cover in DENA 4. Okay, so we want to get away from roller coaster occlusions and stick to nice level planes of occlusion. So here's an example of, you know, some docs, you guys know better than I do, I can promise you that, when to double butt something and when not to, okay? And what we find is when, you know, you don't quite have the crown root ratio that you're looking for with a bicuspid, it pays to hook onto a canine. Now here's a very, very important take home from this course. Why some partials fail in the precision partial world and why some don't. You see that where it shows it's kind of out of proportion there. I have to ask my IT guy to correct that. But see where it says 4 millimeters and 2 millimeters, should be, the space should replicate the same. But basically what we're saying there is the attachment itself is 4 mils. We need that 4 mils. And we need 2 mils of acrylic on top of it. If we don't, you're going to be sadly eventually disappointed because that acrylic tooth will always chip and break off. And so it's really, really important for you and us to assess before we go down this road, and that's part of the assessment of sending us study models, to make sure that we actually have that 6 or more mils from the ridge to the opposing dentition. Very, very important point. So how much room is required for a strong precision attachment? Kind of covered that. I'm just going to keep on going here. Okay. So minimum occlusal clearances from the ridge opposing strong durable acrylic over the attachment. Again, like this is a truckload of room, what you see there now, but we don't want to have less than 6 mils. Can't stress that enough. I tried to illustrate that in so many places, and this kind of describes why. You can kind of see where those 2 red lines are. One's the ridge, one's the opposing. We easily have probably 3 or 4 mils above that attachment. It's optimal. But if you only have 2, you still don't have to worry. It's a great application. So another question I get often is what's the point if you have a space under the attachment, the precision attachment, or should it be right down on the tissue? So here's the thing, a lot of times we're forced, and we're going to be talking about that a little bit later, but you always want to prep your margin, your distal margin, a little bit sub G, okay? That way we can just scalpel the tissue a little bit and get that that attachment right down tight on the ridge, okay? It's a really good design feature, prevents food from getting under there, and it just overall, it makes everything stronger if you do that. So we want to place these attachments on the top of the ridge so that they are right in where the occlusal fossa is going to be. So I just wanted to give you a quick picture of that. And the next thing is, a lot of docs say, well, okay, what's with this parallel and finish? What the heck is that? You know, I know the cost of there's cost of the attachments, but what the heck is parallel and finish? And so ultimately we have a little tool, because this is done still old school with a surveyor, and which you've probably all seen that in dental school also. And we actually make sure that those, like a door hinge, or maybe that's not the best, but door hinges, if they're crooked, they bind. Well, and so is these attachments. If they're not perfectly parallel, the partial denture won't go in and out as nicely as we maybe want them to, and they'll bind, and the patient has a hard time getting them in. So it's a very important step, and there is, when you get invoiced for these cases, there's a parallel and finish fee, and there's a fee for the actual attachment. At the end of the day, it gets to be almost like approximately $200 for each parallel and finish, but it's there is more labor involved in making these, and so that's what that price is reflective of. And it's just a little planning again to the horizontal plane that we're building our occlusion to, and this was, you know, the final porcelain that we finished on this one patient that we've kind of saw from the very beginning, and we were really ecstatic with this. We just thought overall it was a super great result. Again, we could see how critical it was with the E shot, okay, how high the lip line goes. We had a super nice display. The patient was ecstatic with the results. This is obviously peeled back to kind of show. And we got a release from this patient. That was the before picture. And you'll see the after. It's like this patient was ecstatic with the before and after. And so here again, showing the Emma picture, how much tooth he displayed. And when a patient shows that much tooth with just saying Emma, we're very reluctant to make it any longer, okay? And I believe the final restorations were about as long as that furthest corner down was. So let's talk records, scanners, or traditional impressions, okay? You know, I'm going to share with you, you know, scanners are a wonderful tool, and we get records all the time. But I'm also going to show you an impression that, we'll put this just for sake under here, Mark. This was a recent case that we got, and I don't know if you can quite see that, Mark, but just these margins are fairly deep sub G. If you have this many deep sub G margins, can you see that in there pretty close?
Bring it out just
like down to the top?
There you go. Yeah.
Okay.
Right on there. Perfect.
So if you look at this, you cannot pull those deep. I have not seen that yet. It doesn't matter what scanner, even this remote one from iTero, they laugh, it's just a demo. But in any event, you cannot pull that many deep sub G margins. If you can, hallelujah, I'm happy for you. But I don't see most general dentists pulling those scans off with that many deep sub G margins. So I just want to make sure that you know that what we're looking for is a super stable polyvinyl with good techniques to basically pick up those margins. And if we get a good pickup of margins and a good edentulous area, we can go to start to finish on this, Mark. Like literally, if we get the proper records right from the get-go, from crowns, frame, we have 2 weeks basically from start to finish on a case like this. This is the honeycomb. We also have another material, a more economic material called trio gum. And but both materials are fantastic, Really, really important though. You want to have a good, custom tray system. And I'm just going to go over here. Oh, and just to cover this one more time, a good upper impression picks up the hamular notches and ultimately the incisive papilla. And that's how we mount the upper case. We have to have that to get the horizontal plane of the upper correct. If not, we have to have a good face bow, obviously. And so whatever your system you're more familiar with, that's what we encourage you to use to give us a nice occlusal plane that's, that we can assess. So this is just in the materials that I was telling you about. These heat wave trays, I can't tell you enough. Every office needs to have a box of this. You have to. You know, anyone who thinks you're just doing digital, I think they're just not seeing what they don't see. And so if you have a solid backup of impression material, good polyvinyl like the honeycomb or trio gum, and these border lock trays, these are like custom stock trays. The docs, a lot of the docs that are watching this have already used them. They use them religiously. But when you're doing it with crown and bridge, I can't, and this type of cases, I can't strongly enough. Sometimes you just beat your head against the wall to capture this material or the records. Like for example, I was saying just earlier, we want you to prep a little sub G wherever your attachment is or the precision attachment's gonna go. And sometimes you just fight it so much to get the scan when it's just as easier to pull off an impression. So, but I'll leave that at the end of the day for whoever, whatever your comfort level is, okay? So this next slide is basically just showing you the setup that we made to a nice level plane of occlusion. And then there's a little peekaboo view of the attachment on its own with the metal housing on it. Our restorative goals when we do a transition with, like for example, the gingival transition, we're trying to get it so that we integrate a nice transition from the crown to the denture tooth and down the line. So it looks really nice and golden proportion. Another example of how we like that transition to go. That's our goal. And again, that's where the pictures really help us. Am I gonna, if I have a patient that shows no teeth with EMMA, like none at all, are you really concerned about hitting those magic goalposts? Not so much. But if we have somebody that's super high E and they're showing the Julia Roberts smile, it's really important and we can do it. So these are traditional PFM preps, okay? We just want a nice chamfer all the way around, and wherever there is a precision attachment to just drop that margin just a little deeper than at the gum line, okay? I'm not saying go deep sub G 2 mils, but just slightly below the tissue is all we're really looking for. And I think I just explained, this is a nice little illustration where the arrow is. If you're at the tissue or above, we get this goofy transition of, and the attachment when we're fighting to get it low on the ridge, it just doesn't, it looks a little weak. I've yet to have one of these attachments snap off because it's Ti-Lite, medical non-precious with titanium. These are like super solid. The only reason if it did snap is if the partial was not seating properly on the ridge and it just, yeah, it was just neglected. Okay. And now we've got the prep margin. Again, sub G, just really want to make sure I covered that point. And here's ultimately what we're trying to do. What makes or breaks a really nice transition from a partial denture to crowns, we try to get, see those, basically the red arrow kind of point there. We're trying to always put the tooth, so the tooth transition, we don't have the pink coming right up. Now on a lower, patients don't see that, but on an upper, they do, okay, when it's in a transition of an aesthetic zone. So want to make sure that you know that that's one of our goalposts. We're trying to make sure that we have teeth the denture tooth nicely up to that surveyed attachment. So now we got a PFM alloy. We're talking about medical, non-precious or precious. We do either one, but it's just not cost prohibitive. I can't remember last precious metal crown we've done with ceramic alloy. Okay, so porcelain butt margins. When you get close to this area, and patients, even when they don't really go high smile lines before their pictures, I don't know what your guys' experience is, but most of the time what we see later on, everyone's smiling way harder than they ever did before. And so we always advise doing porcelain butt margins, and we had a little slogan back in the day when it was mostly PFM and zirconia and all those things were all new, but we had the nicest butts in town. So it went really good at the show. James with his leather pants anyways, he was loving that slogan. Okay, so now combination margins versus porcelain butt margins. With the techniques that we have today, we can get just as good a fit, but you'll even see this one is a combination margin. You just see that slight halo of metal underlying. And so if you are in a critical aesthetic zone, we advise you prep a nice chamfer, and that way you'll end up with a nice really nice transition of color, okay? Essential rule and no exception. Okay, so here we go. We're gonna be at the point, you got delivered these crowns and the precision partial, which by the way, if you look at that illustration right there, you should think that's a case, it's between $5 and $6 grand all day long for that restorative option for the patient. That's 2 crowns and basically a precision partial. And again, I just think this is a realistic number for the majority of people that walk into most offices. Whereas otherwise, you know, even if they went to a denturist, they're going to spend $2 or $25 to $3 grand. Or in your office, I don't know, but at the end of the day, you know the nut you got to crack to get something that's going to last that patient a really long time. But where I was going with this point, when you go to cement or try these cases in, you know, whether it's a wax try-in stage or the final stage, you always have the crowns engaged in this partial for the try-in or the final cementation. I can't emphasize that enough. If you get in the habit of put the crown in first and then click it in place, all it takes is just a little shift and you're done. You can't figure out why the darn thing's not seating. So it's always, 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 always have those engaged in the housings before you go to cement it. So we're doing pretty good here. We're into it for 45 minutes, Mark. My goal is to end at 8. So if we go a little bit longer for the keeners, I'd encourage you to hang on, but we're on right track right now. So my point in this one, ultimately you want to see how high is the patient's aesthetic and functional goals. Sometimes when you got a real, lack of better words, dental cripple, and they've got overclosed, you have to open them up. And where I'm going with this is, if you don't have a predictable way to find a new VDO that supports a healthy airway and or jaw joint position, you need to come to our Dentifor course. I can't emphasize that enough, because you can't just go subjectively open things. How did that feel? With today's standards, I think it's just you're opening up a can of worms before you're going to get yourself in trouble with patients complaining about various other symptoms that follow opening that. So you need a very solid way of doing that. And we definitely have the means of teaching you that, but not obviously in this here. And we'll probably, if you like, If it interests you in the chat, just send us information of the next course, and Mark will, I'm sure we can send that to them. Okay, so yeah, this is just, that's just basically what that case looks like from the top there. And another case where it's 2-3 unit anterior bridges, and you know, you didn't even actually have to have a clasp and such on the last molars there, but I don't know, it's just I think it's safer to do that. And again, that's what the framework, I think that's our picture of the very front. And so in similar cases of metalingual is not essential. It's just if it's a little tighter, it's always safer to have that there. So it's if you didn't have enough room to open up the occlusion. And this question here we get all the time: how do we replace the nylon retention? These will typically wear out, those little nylon sleeves in there. Every year to sometimes patients don't even come back for it because it's like, you know, when things are super parallel and things just fit in there, they don't even realize that they got to do this. But when you are losing some retention and patients say, yeah, it just doesn't stay in like it does before, all it takes is a little instrument, and I don't have an instrument here, but I do have this, and I'm going to go over to the camera here. Basically, just all you have to do is just put a little instrument, sorry Mark, right down into, and just pop it out. You just push it in there and pop, that whole thing will just pop right out, okay? I wouldn't advise going in there with a high speed. It just, a lot of times it'll damage the inside more than you want, but literally you just go in there with a little instrument, twist it, it's just gonna pop right out. But you have to put an instrument there to pop it out, otherwise it never will. And what actually wears out, it's not the outside, it's the inside. That little nipple on the inside is where the retention comes from, okay? So the outside just holds everything steady from moving around. So, and there's basically a few different colors that you'll see from us. You're going to see this is the whole selection here, and they're all the different strengths or retention modes, but this normally you'll get from us. The white is what's inside, and the orange is what is like the next one up that's most commonly used if the white ones aren't enough, okay? But honestly, white ones, they've always held the test of time. It's very rare that you ever use or want the orange ones, but if you have to, just put those in after a year, or if it's loosening up, and it'll be plenty of retention. And the black ones should only be used for processing, and when they're in the kit, if for whatever reason you have to do a pickup impression of a crown with an existing ERA on it, you want to take it with that black housing in place, okay? Because we'll have the same housing in the lab, or you return that black one with it, and when you take the impression of it, we just simply pop that black one in the impression, and we can replicate exactly where that attachment is. So pink acrylic considerations, again, when we go to finish it, we want to fill those areas to avoid any food getting entrapped in there. So this is really important that you really explain to the patient, once you deliver this case, that, you know, within a month, if you've done an immediate type of extraction or something, you've done some sort of surgery, you want to have the patient come back for that, just to check that everything's in, because as you know, if you've had immediate extractions, that's going to heal up, and we want to make sure that we reline it properly after the case. And you know, especially the real quick way, I'll show you this here. Ultimately, patients should reline the portion after insertion. If you've had immediate extractions, 1 to 2 months, come back, do a quick little reline like you would anything with a little light body. and then we'll just fill that in. And but really, if you have a mature ridge that's been the way it is for many years, you don't even have to check it after a year. I mean, it's already settled in.
One quick question.
Yeah.
Question is just a process question.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a need for a wax up stage? And is this done prior to preparation or of the crowns?
Okay, so when we do, if we're unclear of the bite, if the bite is unclear, and say we opened it, opened the occlusion and such. See, if a patient went through an orthotic progression with like a phase 1 orthotic progression, or we had some sort of interim, we work dialed in what test drove the new bite, we can pretty much go from start to finish, okay? But if it's a CO, call it a CO case, you have enough room over the attachments, but it's a free end case, we do advise, like bilateral free end kind of case, we do advise we do a bite block, okay? And we can even do the bite block when you send the study models in, the upper and lower study models, we make the bite block at that time. If everything looks good, then we send it back to your office, and you basically take the bite block situation there. And then if you've done that and you nailed the preps, nice clear preps, nice clear tissue and the impression, we can literally go start to finish. Okay, we don't need to do a try-in. More often than not, the times we do try-ins is when we're doing big aesthetic changes. Then we want to do that try-in of porcelain/teeth when we're dealing with bite and a big change of aesthetics. Hope that answers that, but if there's any more details on that, if it wasn't quite clear on what you're driving at, please just text me again, okay?
Awesome, he says. Answered.
Okay, perfect. So now this one here, this little illustration here, I put this one up because this has happened to us quite often. We have doctors, we've made the crowns, like say that, not the 1-3, the 2-3 there. Say for example, we made that crown ahead of time, but we did not go ahead with the partial yet. We just went ahead with the crown. Doctors ask, well, what do I do? Like, how do I pick that up? And if you back up, remember I was saying the little black housing? Those black housings will fit over the precision attachment, and you take a full impression of the whole arch. And with that little black housing on the crown, and then we can go to start to finish with the frame and or the partial and the acrylic and processing it properly. Again, this is the same sort of application. And basically, sorry for the quality of this picture, it was a little bit fuzzy there, but that's a little metal housing that we snap into when you provide us that little black housing. It's in the impression. We snap these special metal, it's almost like an analog, but it's not an impression analog, it's precision attachment analog, snaps into the attachment, and we've got a perfect indication. And you know what's funny? We do a lot of repairs of old stuff, and it's really not hard to replace these and get a new functioning partial. There's some nice porcelain, PFM porcelain work that we did. And here's some other common questions that I get. After the verified treatment plan with adequate VDO, basically you're come down to three appointments, okay? Prep appointment for however long it takes time to prep the multiple desired. If a quality impression is provided, 3 weeks including shipping and delivery to an office, okay? That's from start to finish. You know, literally 3 weeks, you can plan whatever day you sent it, because I'm just allowing 2 to 3 days for shipping, and it's out.
Don't hit the table.
Oh, sorry, Mark. Yeah, final delivery of semi-precision crown times cement. Yeah, you just book whatever time it would to cement 2 crowns. Most offices in our world is 10 to 15 minutes per tooth unit. So I don't know. It shouldn't take more than a half an hour to place a case like this. 3 appointments are required if something isn't clear, it takes another impression, or say there was a big aesthetic change and or bite change. It's safer to have a try-in before we process everything. Let's see, essential steps for adjustment-free delivery for your Ocean semi-precision partial crown. Okay, so after removing the temps, clean them up, okay, and make sure. You would not believe how many times the crown doesn't seat. Well, I've been in these offices and there's still temp cement on there. You got to make sure it's all cleaned up, and just to cross every T and dot every I if you're wondering why it doesn't seat. Try in the partial with the crowns engaged, as we said before. Okay, it's very, very important. You got to have the crowns engaged in the partial. Do not cement the crowns without being. It just has to be done. There's no other option. And then your partial will otherwise likely not align. If you do try those crowns in and try to snap it in later, there's more problems that happen than good if you do that. So after cementing crowns while in place, remove the partial and clean the excess cement. Lots of docs are doing this, and it's just the easiest way to do it. And here's a nice little video. I believe this is a video, isn't it, Mark?
Yeah.
And where the patient put this in. This happened to be a lady at our work that we did a partial denture case for, and you can tell she's very nervous. She didn't know what's going to happen. And that's the kind of reaction you're going to get at first. It's like, oh my gosh, like, okay, that comes out, Is there sound on with that one, or is it just video, Mark?
Oh, yes. My bad.
A little bit on that one premolar. So I'm just going to do a little bit more balancing the occlusion, and then we'll.
Oh, that's something that actually shows you? Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So that was Dr. Larson. Thank you very much for delivering that case for Diana at work here. And it was, at first it's a little daunting. The patients they're going like this and they think everything's come out. But as you know, when those crowns are cemented into place, they're in tight, okay? They're not coming out. If they come out, it's because there's just no mechanical retention or something weird like that. But I wouldn't go ahead and do it unless I didn't have enough mechanical retention. I can promise you that. But yeah, and then it's just, that's the experience. Don't expect some audible click, but it should definitely feel like it's seated in, okay? There should be no question. If the bite's way off, then it's not seated properly, okay? It's just not, it hasn't gauged properly. Can we do a crown attachment to a pre-existing partial? Okay, now I'm going to do a little example here. I'm going to go right to this, this illustration. This was a case, it's actually ongoing right now. Can you see that nice and clear, Mark?
Yep.
Okay, we almost finished this partial denture, ready to go and to process, got it back. Patient doesn't like these clasps and ask what other aesthetic possibilities are there. And if we go to flexi partial material, I don't think we're going to get the same hugging grip as these retentions here. So as these eye bars. And we can't make anything, we can't even make some hide it any more than that. So this would have been a perfect ERA case. Prep cuspid here, prep that bicuspid there, and boom. Now we can still do that here. It's not a problem. If you take this off, and make sure we have enough occlusal room by the looks of it. We did. I haven't measured it up yet, but let's just have a quick peek here. I would say with a very minor adjustment, adjust that opposing cuss tip, and that wouldn't be an issue here. And we've got a truckload of room here. This would have been a perfect precision partial denture. But again, this was, you know, when we get these cases in, I can't call an office every time and say, man, did you consider a partial denture here? It just, we're kind of committed. But in this case, it's not too late, okay? It can be done, this can be prepped up, and we can incorporate precision attachments in these, in the denture teeth. So to answer that question, absolutely yes, we can. Okay, we're at the 8 o'clock mark, and you know, respectfully, if you guys got things going, I totally get it. But if you want to hang on, it's not going to be that much longer, and we're going to see the final of that very first case. Okay. So again, here's that the case that we first showed you at the very beginning, where we open the vertical. And you can, this is a little closer indication to the bottom picture. And then here's the after. This camper is very happy. And now and we did get a release from this patient, said, yes, they're okay. That fella is a happy, handsome dude. And I think everyone will agree. It's a great before and after, and he's planning on getting the lower done next eventually. He's missing all his posterior teeth there. And this is a beautiful picture from Diana, at work. And she too had some teeth removed in the anterior. They're just too not savable. And you're gonna see a beautiful after result here too. We got a lot of tears out of this one after it was all done. You know, I know all of you guys have had that experience where you've basically seen these kind of before and after cases, and you rock someone's life. And I tell you, that's the one thing that is still, you know, if it was just for making single molars, I think I would have lost the love over the years. They still pay the bills, those single molars. But I think, and as for most dentists too, they still have to make their bread and butter on those single tooth units. But what really challenges our brain and motivates us is when we can do life-changing smiles like this. And the next level of changing, making new smiles is building dentition that optimizes airway, jaw joint, and muscles. That's the top 10% that we want to help dentists get to that point. If you want to reach that next level, doesn't matter what occlusal camp you've been in, this will add to it. And there's not many dentists that can claim that through their service that they're actually optimizing airway and jaw joint. Okay, so that's a game changer that 90% of dentists don't do. And that's our Dentifor plug. But other than that, I'm so thankful, and I can't wait to get my first study model from one of the docs watching this to say, hey, would this be a good application? Thank you again. And Mark, did I forget anything before we tune out?
I'm going to pause for 20 seconds to see if we have any questions, and then we'll say our goodbyes.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic.
I need the Jeopardy music at this point. I don't have
Dude, that's okay.
I don't have it queued up. I do have it.
They know how to reach us.
Yeah.
It's all good.
And that's the next slide.
Thank you.